So it all started before I was even born. I was born into a Muslim family. Both my mom and my dad's side, they're all Muslim. And so my mom and my dad, they had an arranged marriage. My father and his lineage is from Palestine, while my mom and her lineage is from Jordan. So my mom and my dad, they got married here in the States, in Pennsylvania, and my mom came all the way from Jordan. This was her first husband, her first, even relationship. She never had a boyfriend before my father. And when they got married, my dad was very deceptive. She thought everything was going to be great. He was definitely not the man that was shown to my entire family. When she moved over here to America and it was just them here alone in the United States, my father was so abusive to my mom. He would beat her, he would starve her, and that's when rejection really entered. So it was before I was even born that the rejection, had fully entered into my life. Upon her giving birth to me, my mom went to the courts. She said, I want to file for a divorce, He's very abusive to me. She had called the police. Every time the police came, my dad would talk to them, and they just never believed her. They never believed her. So she went to the courts, and they said, okay, we'll grant you the divorce. You're allowed to take Nadine back to Jordan with you for 3 months. My mom took me back with her. And when she did, she never brought me back to America. She kept me in Jordan. And so at this point, she had completely went against the U.S. law, right? She has multiple bench warrants out for her arrest. She never came back to bring me because Jordanian law at the time did not recognize U.S. law. Jordanian law says she's the mom, she's Jordanian, Nadine's allowed to live here. But I was born as a U.S. citizen, so the United States and Jordanian law started going at it with each other. The FBI was involved. We had multiple judges, everything working around this specific situation. It was one of maybe 2,000 a year international kidnappings. Even though she was my mom, she had internationally kidnapped me to Jordan and never brought me back. During this time, my dad's making a good amount of money. He owns a business. So he's flying every month to see me in Jordan, right? Like for once a month, he'd stay, for the weekend and come visit me. But the visitation was monitored visitation. So he'd always have to see me in something called a markaz, right? Where there'd be like an officer, there'd be someone watching. So my dad would take the trip all the way from Pennsylvania to Jordan to come see me once a month. And during this time, he had built a rapport with my family, like I'm coming to see her, everything's all good. So this lasted about 5 years. It's now the year 2005. And my dad says to my mom, he goes, hey, I'm gonna take Nadine to the zoo. Is that okay? I wanna take her to the zoo. And they allowed him to take me out of the markaz, which is the monitored visitation, and to take me to the zoo. At this time, my dad was not taking me to the zoo. He was bringing me all the way back to the United States. And so the FBI was completely involved with this. They actually made me a passport, and they sent my dad to Jordan. But they said, if you get arrested, there's nothing we can do to help you. Like, if you get arrested in Jordan, it's completely out of our hands now. But as soon as she's on the airplane, in the air, she's considered to be on U.S. soil. So that's what my dad did. My mom sent me off to the zoo that day and just didn't see me again, never went back to live with her again. And so I remember that day, like, it's crazy because I was only about 5 years old. But I remember being at the airport. I remember something was off about the whole ordeal. But as I was on the plane, I remember there was something had gone wrong, right? Where I think someone was notified on the plane that I was being kidnapped from Jordan. But because we were already on U.S. soil, being on that plane, we were good. We touched down, and there were police officers all around us. They took us into a separate room, made sure I was okay. And from there, I started living in the state of Ohio. So born in Pennsylvania, lived in Jordan, and now I'm in the state of Ohio. And this is really where it all begins. My upbringing with my father was very hard. I grew up with a single father, then again, a single Muslim father. And growing up, in a Muslim family is already very tough when you live overseas, right? But imagine growing up here in America where everything around you, all your friends, all your classmates are completely, uncovered, and they have friends that are boys and they go to things like football games and they're living their norm. And you're like, why is my life so different? And so upon growing up with my dad, I think he was so angry at what my mom had done when she originally stole me. I think looking back at it, that every time he looked at me, he thought of her and what she had done. And so now my dad has his name on the border in Jordan. He can't go to Jordan. My mom can't come to the United States. My dad can't go bury, his mom and his dad that passed away because his name's on the border in Jordan. So his whole family lives over there. He risked everything to get me back. And I think he looks at me in resent every day. But at the time, you don't know that. You're just a child growing up. I try not to blame him now. But when I look back, I realize, wow, whatever lack of love you had from your family, I can't really blame you. It's what you grew up in, and that's why you're taking what you're taking out on me. You don't know better. So we grew up in Ohio, and, all the school I went to, it was like 900 people in the total school. So it was fairly small, and it was all white people. So I say that because everyone had like blonde hair and blue eyes, majority. There were maybe like 2 or 3 like black people, maybe like 2 Hispanics, but being somewhere of like a different race is like so rare, where I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. I was very hairy, dark hair, mustache, little unibrow. And I remember I was just getting picked on at school, getting picked on for being so hairy, getting picked on for being weird. And on top of that, I'm going home. My father and I are just so impoverished. We don't have money. We're on like all these food stamps. There's rats in our home, cockroaches in our home. And I just remember being like so frustrated. Like when I go to school, the kids are picking on me. All these kids, they have both parents. They have a nice granite island in their kitchen with a fridge where the water comes out, and I go home and I have nothing. Like, it was so frustrating to see what everyone had and not having it when I went home. On top of that, my dad was so abusive. He started becoming abusive around the age of 6 and 7. And around that time, I was very much missing my mom, but I didn't know what had happened. We weren't in contact with each other. My dad would not allow me to, obviously tell anyone, where I had moved. I wasn't in contact with my family because my family in Jordan, they had a lot of connections. And so my dad was scared that someone would try to come and steal me. So I remember sleeping in my house in Youngstown, Ohio, and putting like a hammer or something underneath like my bed in case someone tried to come take me or hurt me. My dad would always put lies in my head like someone's gonna try to steal you. Make sure you're very careful. So I was just paranoid. Like, I'm a little girl in a new country, just not at peace. And I remember just little things I would do. If I'd wear like a little V-neck, he'd spit on me. He'd call me a whore. When my boobs started growing and when my body started to develop, he was so mean to me. It's like he hated me for my body developing, and he just hated the fact that I was growing to Western culture while being a Muslim. And ever since a young age, I hated Islam. I didn't understand it, but I hated it. I said, how come you pray 5 times a day and you treat me like this? How come all my family, even my grandmas, my aunts and uncles, everyone's praying 5 times a day, but everyone's miserable? There's abuse happening in the family. Every time my dad's on the phone with someone from home, it's always like a bad report. Like, it's just like there's no peace. And so even though I didn't understand what the fullness of Islam was, I saw the fruits of it. And all the fruits of it were so rotten all the time. I think that's when I started to grow, I guess, not hate, but a resentment towards who I knew God to be. And that was Allah. And I remember I would try to pray to Allah. I would try to do the prayers, the 5 times a day. But I'm literally just standing, bending down, putting my head to the ground. Like, there's there's no peace in any of this. And I was just getting so frustrated at such a young age. And I also didn't understand how my dad could be around these, other Muslims, could get on the phone and make it seem like he's doing a great job. While at the time, he had been beating me. He was pouring gasoline on my hair. I found out in like 5th grade that I had lice because it was like going around the school. They found out I had it. They called home. And I remember I was so scared when they called home because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get it. I'm about to get it. I came home. He said, you're so dirty. The school's calling me. They think I'm a bad parent. They think that I'm dirty. Mind you, our house was really dirty. But he said, they think I'm dirty. I remember he went out. He went to the gas station. He dragged me into the bathtub, put my head on right where the bathtub was, and grabbed the gasoline, not like with water in it, the one that goes into your car, and poured it on my head. I had burns on my head. Gasoline, the smell's so strong. So I went to school. People are, always doing this in the hallway because I stink, because I smell like gasoline. I have little burns all over my scalp. And it was just, even everything I'm saying now, it doesn't even summarize all of that was happening. But it was a hard upbringing, nevertheless. In 6th grade, like I said, my body started to develop the most it had ever developed. And at this time, I was really shy to tell my dad that I needed like a bra, or, my period had also started. I was shy to tell him I needed like, feminine materials. Single father, right? And so I remember like I would wear like multiple tank tops to like hide my body because I always felt like this was very dirty. Like, especially growing up Muslim, it's very dirty that I'm having a body at such a young age. But then I noticed that the boys in my school were liking the fact that my body was growing in. And so even though I kind of had like a really love-hate relationship with it because of how my father was treating me at home, but then also the boys at school liked it. And so this is the first time now in my life where I'm getting some type of attention. The boys are starting to like me. They're starting to look at me more, kind of come up to like my locker or start texting me, following me on Facebook. And so my body's growing in, and I realize, wow, for the first time in my life, I finally have someone who actually wants to talk to me. Like, I'm not going up to them first, trying to find a friend, someone wants to talk to me, And so I said, okay, I'm a young girl. This is the way now to finally have some type of approval or some type of connection with someone. So my 7th grade year started, and I remember I was as like depressed as ever. And I was cutting myself. I was very frustrated with my life. I was cutting myself. I started cutting on my legs. And then my counselor found out I was cutting on my legs. So I had to start hiding it. So I started cutting on my stomach, because who checks a stomach, right? And then I started cutting on my back. And I just started cutting myself. And as this was happening, that's when like those suicidal thoughts started entering so much more, is when I started, harming myself. And I remember this so clearly. Around this time, I would see demons. And now when I say that, as a born again believer, that's not so crazy, right? But when you're unsaved, when you're just a little girl, when you grow up, in a Muslim household, people are looking at you like you're crazy. So I remember every time I would sleep, I'd wake up, I'd have horrible sleep paralysis, feel like someone's on top of me, choking me. I'd wake up and I'd scream the word demon, demon, demon. I see demons. My dad was like, no, absolutely not. I think he was scared. So he sent me to a psychiatrist. At the young age of 7th grade, I went to a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me with ADHD, PTSD, bipolar, borderline schizophrenia, major anxiety, and major depressive disorder. Am I forgetting any? No, that's all of them. So they diagnosed me with all of these things, got me on a bunch of meds, because when I'm talking to psychiatrists and I said, oh, I see demons. I see them in my sleep. I see them in my house. When I talk to people, I see demons. They just drugged me up. And so now in 7th grade, I'm on like 5 or 6 different medications. I'm just like a walking zombie. And guess what? Nothing's helping. I'm going to therapy once a week. I'm on all this medication. And now more than ever, the suicidal thoughts have gotten to a whole new level. Like, even the suicidal thoughts were, quote unquote, less before I even got on all this medication. So I'm on all this medication and I'm frustrated because I said, wow, isn't this medication supposed to help me? Isn't going to a therapist supposed to help me? What's wrong with me? Because I'm around all these kids that are just focused on sports and focused on their grades and focused on what they're going to do after school. And their life is so, like, normal. What is wrong with me? And so I went home one day in 7th grade and my dad was working late at work. I went into his medicine cabinet and I took over like 43 pills. I just downed them and I wanted to end my life. This was my first suicide attempt. It was going to be my first out of 3 that I'm about to get into. And I remember at that moment, I genuinely just did not want to live. Like, I didn't see the point in living. Like, I was so tormented. I felt like I was drowning, but I could see the air, but I couldn't breathe in the air. And it just felt like nothing would stop, you know? And so I had my first suicide attempt. I was in the hospital for a couple weeks, and then they sent me to a place called Belmont Pines in Liberty, Ohio, which was a mental health asylum, like an insane asylum, basically, right? But they label it as rehab. I went there, and you would think that's a place where someone goes to get help. No, things got worse. Because now I'm in the room with people who have tried burning themselves alive. Now I'm in the room with people who literally, like, talk to the wall. And I remember just being in there feeling like, whatever I'm going through, it's not this. It's not this. And they won't let you leave. You have to take even more medicine while you're there. They won't let you leave. And I just remember being in there being like, what is the point to life? Because this is not it. I got out of there. And 2 months after that, I had brought so much shame to my dad. Mind you, when I had my suicide attempt, the fire department came, the police came, everybody came to our apartment where we lived, small city. Word got around so fast, you know? About 2 months after my attempt, my dad had attempted. Yeah, out of the shame and dishonor I brought to our household. Because if you know anything about, a Muslim household, the reputation of that household is very sacred. You don't share what's going on outside this household. You keep everything buttoned up perfectly, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, and in front of people, you're very reserved. So for people to see this happen, obviously now, the secret's out that something wrong is happening in this household that would even cause his daughter to try to kill herself. So about 2 months later, I'm at my friend's house. I'm spending the night, and I'm there for like 3 nights. It's like over a break or something. And my dad is just not calling on me or checking on me, which is like so rare because he would call me constantly. And I knew people would call it intuition, but I knew it was God. I knew something deep down in me was like, something's not right with your father. So I went home, and my friend and her mom, they were like, hey, we're going to stay down here. We lived in an apartment. We're going to stay downstairs. Just walk up to your house, walk in. If you see anything out the blue, just start screaming. We'll just come up. I said, okay. I walked into my house, and everything's like slow-mo. I remember walking past the kitchen. There's like flies everywhere, food that hasn't been touched. I'm like, what is going on? And as soon as I saw that, I knew something was off. I walk into his bedroom, and he's sleeping. So I see that he's breathing, and I yell at him. I'm like, why aren't you answering the phone? Like, what? Like, what's happening? And he looks up at me, he gets out of bed, and his face is like slurred. And I'm like, why is he talking like that? Like, why is like his face like that? And I go over to the side of his bed, and I see the Quran, and I see a napkin on top of it with pen. And it says, I'm so sorry I failed you. Love, Baba. And I start screaming. And then I realize these are empty pill bottles. This is the Quran. Like, I realized what had happened. I scream, police come, ambulance comes. Like, this is like 3 months apart. And so This was my 7th grade year. In the midst of, about to finish middle school, going to high school, things just aren't getting better. My dad also went to the hospital for 3 weeks. And after that, I was staying at my friend's house. My school is looking at my life like, what is going on? So I start talking to my local counselor at my school. I'm telling her kind of about just how my upbringing is. I'm thinking I can finally confide in somebody. And as I'm starting to confide in her, they are now looking at me like I'm just like demonized, right? And it got to the point where they had told my principal that they think I'm in harm's way and they want to can we look into foster care options? Like, what are the options we could do to get her out of this home? And I felt so betrayed because I'm like, no, I don't have family here in America. My whole family's in Jordan and, my family's